Welcome to the Workbench and welcome to another episode of Wheels Wings TV. Today we have the latest limited edition kit from Eduard, the 1/72nd scale Hurristory or Hurristory. However you say it, it's a 1/72nd scale hurricane. Let's have a look. Inside we have two sprues, completely identical, which means we have two complete kits inside. And this, of course, is not Eduard plastic. This is from Arma Hobby. And having built a couple of these previously, I can say they are probably the finest Hawker Hurricane in 1/72nd scale. Dimensional breakdown, we have complete upper and lower wings instead of the typical left and right break. It does encompass some of the cockpit floor. Very, very crisp, very sharp engraved panel lines and different weights of panel lines. Most of these are all relatively the same. For control surfaces, much heavier, much broader, but still very, very sharp. Some little bits of raised detail where necessary, very subtle little fasteners around the guns, landing gear. Of course, the Hurricane was partially tube construction with fabric coverings. We have that very nicely done on the rear of the fuselage. Very, very subtle, faceted look of the fabric covering with the metal panels forward. Once again, with very nice, subtle little fastener details. You get separate elevators. Tailplane is one piece, left and right, top and bottom. We've got a reasonably well detailed instrument panel. Nothing to write home about per se, but not too bad. We've got two types of propeller. I believe that's the Rotal and the de Havilland propeller, along with three different spinners. Got some of our cockpit structure with the tube frame, floor, pilot's headrest and armor plate. We do have a tropical Vaux filter as an option, radiator. Nicely done wheels. These are some of the nicest wheels I've seen in plastic. Arma Hobby definitely spend time on their wheels, because not only are they flattened on one side, you can actually make out that it says Dunlop on the sidewall. Whether that's supposed to be there or not, I don't care. That's really cool and really fine detail, especially in plastic. Normally you only see that kind of stuff in resin. Exhaust pipes, conventionally done, so they're not hollowed out, but a little bit of careful attention with the drill bit and you can take care of that. But definitely refreshing to see an entire model kit on one sprue. And we're just blowing through this one. Onto the clear parts already. We've got our windshield and separate sliding section of the canopy. One of these is wider to accommodate it being in the open position, because obviously it's impossible to have these clear parts scale thick, and it would be completely unrealistic to scale down the size of the rear fuselage, so they make this one overly wide so that it will sit over top of the fuselage in a reasonable manner. We do have our leading edge landing lights. We have our wingtip lights, which we can cut out the molded ones if we so choose, and a formation light for the underside of the fuselage. Clear, crisp, shiny nice prominent raised framing. So if you have to mask these yourself, no real issue. Just burnish the tape down, find it with a knife, and away you go. Now it wouldn't be a Eduard limited edition kit if we didn't have some goodies. And that takes the form of, first of all, some nice brassin resin bits, 2 sets of exhausts, 2 sets of main wheels, and 2 sets of tail wheels. And of course, these are molded with hollow openings, a little bit more realistic depiction. Those look very nice. Of course, no mold seams or anything to deal with, just paint them up, snip them off, glue them in, and Bob is your uncle, proverbially speaking. Now, wheels, these are the 4-spoke wheels, very subtle lettering, Dunlop, very nice. Now these are noticeably smaller than the kit wheels, so I'm going to assume that the ones in the kit are too big, or Eduard got these way too small. Now these, in theory, could be a carryover from a Spitfire set, perhaps. I know the Spitfire wheels were, at least the hubs were, I think, identical between a Spitfire and a Hurricane, so maybe they just decided to interchange the wheels. So I guess whichever ones look better to you, go with those. And resin tail wheel, a little bit finer, crisper detail than we get in the kit. The kit one's about the same size, but a little bit chunkier in terms of the forks. So a little bit more delicate detail. Hopefully that doesn't mean it's going to be a weaker part, but that looks pretty stout. So we follow that with some photo etch. We've got traditional, just plain photo etch with some radiator grills. I'm going to say that's probably wheel well detail. That's for the plate behind the spinner, some little bits and bobs and pieces, and a pre-colored photo etch set. We've got our main instrument panel, we've got our Sutton harness, various other little knobs and nubbins, and we've got some sidewall detail. That's a very interesting interpretation of RAF interior green. Really should be something a bit more approximating that. So that's about 3 or 4 shades too dark, but being buried down in there, not a huge deal, or it takes seconds to strip off that color and just repaint it. Of course, this is all very kind of semi-gloss, glossy finish, so you'd want to make sure you flat those down so it doesn't look like you just slapped a bunch of photo etch in there. Not too bad. And of course, 2 sets of that, 1 for each. 2 pieces of pre-cut mask for the canopies and for the wheels. I'm going to assume that those are sized for the resin wheels and not for the kit wheels. So if you don't like the resin ones, you're on your own for that. And a little tiny piece of clear acetate, which I'm going to assume is for the glass for the reflector sights. So the square ones, obviously you can just cut those out with a knife and a ruler. The round ones, you're probably going to need to employ some sort of punch set to get those out nice and cleanly. And as always, the beautifully printed instruction manual, glossy full color paper, Limited Edition Hurricane Mark 1 Dual Combo. Symbol legend, warnings, sprue map, two main sprues, 2 clear sprues, 2 masks, 2 sets of photo etch, 2 sets of resin, clear film, and a partridge in a pear tree. Color callouts are in Mr. Hobby Aqueous acrylics, Mr. Color lacquers, and Mission Model acrylics. So if you don't have your favorite there, pretty much every paint brand has British colors in there, so just grab the appropriate ones. Pretty much the only parts we are not using are the ones supplied as resin, the exhausts, the wheels, and one of the propeller spinners. As always, start in the cockpit, seat goes onto the rear bulkhead. We've got our photo etch belts and other bits going in, so naturally you're going to be painting all the plastic parts before you put those pre-colored belts in place. We've got our photo etch instrument panel, so grind off all that molded detail, glue on the photo etch. One thing I like to do is glue a thin sheet of clear acetate in between those two for the glass and the instrument panels, because then it's perfectly flat. You don't get any sort of lensing like you do with the PVA glues. Grind off some of the sidewall detail for the photo etch parts, and then photo etch on top of photo etch. Then, yeah, photo etch first, then the tubular framing goes in place. Same idea for the other side, grind off the surface detail, glue your photo etch in. Glue this more photo etch onto that tubular frame. Remove this piece, and you got a piece of photo etch there. Glue all that in, and of course that is all interior gray-green. Now, the first time I built the Mark 1, this piece was a little finicky going in. It seemed like it was a bit too wide with everything in there, so make sure you check your fit there. On the Mark II Hurricanes, which needed a whole new fuselage and a whole new wing, they went together fine, but on the Mark 1s, just pay attention to getting all of this cockpit together. You might need to do a bit of trimming and finagling. But cockpit's done, fuselage goes together, then into the wheel wells, and the wheel wells are very well detailed even out of the box. Some straps for, I'm assuming that's an oxygen bottle. Close up the wheel well, some details to grind off and replace with photo etch. Okay, so... Oh, okay, I guess this is cockpit floor, not... Nope. Nope, that's the roof of the wheel wells, and they want you to emboss a few little humps into it with a ballpoint pen. Walls for the wheel well go into place, so we'd have our photo etch new pieces here. You can install the landing gear at this point. At the very least, I'd say put 24 and 23 in place. You can fit the landing gear in afterwards, no problem there. They're very strong. Upper and lower wings go together. Replacing the rudder pedals with photo etch. That's up to you. That thing is so far in there, even with the cockpit open and the brightest of Judge's flashlights, you're probably not really going to see those. Whatever. Put the floor in. Also calling out the masks for the canopy and for the wheels at this point as well, and the leading edge lights. Fuselage goes onto the wing. Vertical tail is in one piece, drops on top of the elevators, which of course you can pose deflected if you so choose, although I think you need to do a little bit of trimming of some attachment points. carburetor intake with a mesh screen, or the tropical intake, depending on your paint scheme, so keep that in mind. Tail wheel, I would say leave that off until the end. Clear parts, so you do have to cut off the molded plastic wingtips if you want the clear pieces. Not a big deal. And I always suggest, if you use these parts, glue them in with super glue and then sand it down, polish it, and make sure everything is nice and flush, because you don't want to have big gaps or pieces sticking out there. Radiator, it looks like we're replacing the flap with... Are we replacing the flap with photoetch? Yes, a couple of steps later. So yeah, you can cut out the flap if you want. The grills for the front and rear of the radiator. Sometime, depending, maybe it's just me, but I needed about a little 10 thou shim on this piece to avoid a gap. Landing gear covers go in place. Wheels can go on. And these supports, once again, I'd leave those off until the very end. Got the prop hub with your propeller blades and spinner, which are all going to be dictated by your paint scheme. So once again, figure out which one you want to do so you get the right parts. And of course, you do get parts enough to do 2 complete propeller hubs. So just build them both, and then you can make up your mind. We've got our radiator going on. We've got our leading edge landing lights. Those, once again, like wingtips, I would glue those in with a little bit of super glue. Make sure everything's nice and flush, sand it down and polish it, and then mask them off. Got our exhaust going in. I'd leave those off till the end. Carburetor, or the standard intake or the tropical one, glue those in. Propeller, once again, I would leave that until the end, although you'd probably want to glue at least these 3 pieces in place, so we have that little flange. We've got photoetch, new flap for the radiator. We've got some little strut supports for it. We've got the little stirrup for the pilot to get up in. We've got a couple of options for mirrors, depending on the paint scheme we choose. We've got our reflector sight with, depending on the square or the round clear film. We've got, geez, we even got some little hand grabs on the canopy. That's nice. We've got our backup ring and bead sight in photoetch. Once again, marking dependent. And we've got, what is this? Depending on your marking scheme, the iron sights out on the cowling here will be one of 2 different types. Canopy open or canopy closed, and keep in mind you've got 2 different ones. The bigger one is meant to go open. 2 different radio masts, with the straight photoetch one only being for option A. And we've got the photoetch little glare shields for the exhausts, only for 2 options. And your Hurricane is done. This review is going real quick. So we have, I believe, 12 total paint schemes. Most of these are all Battle of Britain era. Option A, number 17 Squadron, July of 1940. No underwing roundels, big, oversized fuselage roundels in big letters, standard dark earth, dark green over sky. We've got Flight Lieutenant Nicholson, Victoria Cross winner of 249 Squadron. August 1940, so still Battle of Britain. Kind of more standard looking Battle of Britain markings, the big letters, but some smaller. Also got our underwing roundels. Interesting, we do have the gas detection patch. So that was a curious little thing. So this would change color if the aircraft flew through a poison gas cloud. Act as a visual identifier so that the pilot knew that if he didn't have his oxygen on already, that he probably should. I don't know how a chlorine gas cloud would get up several thousand feet, but hey, I guess better safe than sorry. We've got number 303, Polish Squadron, September 1940. Of course, the Poles well regarded pilots from the Battle of Britain. Most of them were Polish Air Force flight instructors, so these guys were no rookies. Definitely gave as good as they got. Still standard dark earth, dark green. Number 1 Fighter Squadron. A little more vague here, autumn 1940. Got, I believe Airfix did this in 48 scale at one point. Got the bumblebee artwork up in the nose. We got some paint chipping off of some very severe paint chipping along the wing roots and around the cockpit area there. So this is probably an aircraft that saw a lot of use. Planes got beat up, planes got weathered. They didn't care about oil out here as long as there was plenty of oil in the engine. They didn't care what it looked like. If the guns were loaded and the fuel tanks were loaded and the pilot was well fed, that was all that was important. And the one most of our viewers will probably be interested in, Flying Officer William, aka Willie McKnight of 242 Canadian Squadron, December 1940. This guy was, of course, flying with Douglas Bader. He needs no introduction, with his famous sort of Grim Reaper skull and giving the boot to Hitler. A little bit more unique scheme here is we have one wing painted completely black and the other wing in sky. This was sort of an quick identification scheme that the British were sort of playing around with at one point. Let's again have that on this one here as well. 257 Burma Squadron, also in the winter of 1940. One half under sky, one half in black. With a whole bunch of kill markings on the side of that one. .312 Czechoslovak Squadron, January of 41. Once again, we've got our two-tone underside. We got 73 Squadron El Adim in Libya in February of 41, so we're getting into the North African campaign. Still in our dark earth and dark green scheme with sky and some white leading edges. Something a little bit different. Not sure if that would be for identification or if that was for low-level camouflage. We got number 3 Squadron South African Air Force in Abyssinia, which we now call Ethiopia. Of course, the South Africans replaced all the red in the markings with their own orange. So it's a little bit of one of those hurricanes that at first glance, it's like, oh, that's just another hurricane. Then you look close like, oh, okay, that's different. We got number 245 Squadron in, County Antrim, Northern Ireland, 1940. And obviously this, yes, the privilege of rank. Squadron leaders didn't have to stand, so you didn't have to be A, B, C. You could be, huh? So DX, huh? John William Simpson. Personal marking in the form of a question mark is atypical. Who's on first? And finally, some different colors. 274 Squadron, Gerala in Egypt. Got our Dark Earth, Middle Stone as your blue scheme with the disruptive painting on the front. Curious. Okay, that's interesting. So we have a similar sort of lighter color on the leading edges of the wing and the nose, and the same sort of pattern as this one that was in Libya. Except this, we've got a disruptive pattern of dark green. Interesting. Oh, what we got here? So this looks like could be one of two aircraft, either 4244 or 4245. Lieutenant Allingham, Royal Navy Fighter Squadron, Western Desert, August of 41. The remnants of 803, 805, and 806 squadrons. The unit called Royal Navy Fighter Squadron was equipped with Hurricanes and Wildcats, destined for the Greek Air Force. Convoy, escort, and defense behind the line. Huh, interesting. Disbanded in 42 and they were re-equipped with Fulmars and dispatched to Ceylon. Cool. Something a little bit unique. Once again, Middle Stone, Dark Earth as your blue. And wrap everything up with our stencils. Thankfully, not as many as on modern aircraft. And finally, that brings us to our decals. And they're rather interesting. Now, I've heard about these supposed new style Eduard decals where you, once the decal is set in place, you can peel the clear film off and you get kind of a hybrid of a decal and like a wet transfer or dry transfer. So I'm going to assume that is why the clear carrier on these is horrendously thick and huge. So hopefully that's the case, because otherwise these are awful. So I will reserve some judgment until I actually use these. Now, it doesn't seem like these are super crisp. They don't look silk screened. They look printed, because some of the edges aren't super sharp. You can kind of see the dot matrix of the printing. So hopefully that these will look good once they're on the model, but they're a little, I don't know, it's hard to, I'm assuming some of that's just because of that really thick clear film, but they don't seem super crisp. So we'll have to wait and see. I just so happen to have some Arma Hobby decals here, and you can see very crisp outlines on the letters compared to the Eduard ones where they're a little bit fuzzy. So, of course, these are Eduard's own decals, so I can understand wanting to bring more stuff in-house, but there's a reason everybody uses cartograph decals, because they have the reputation. So, don't know what to say about these. We'll have to wait and see how they actually perform in the real world. But looks like if you do things carefully, you could, in theory, have enough decals for 3 complete aircraft. So you got 2 sets of upper wing, 2 sets of fuselage and lower wing, but because the South Africans have the orange, gives you another set. So if you make one option South African, you've got enough decals for 3 complete aircraft. I guess that's one upside. And finally, a little sheet of stencils, also printed in Czech Republic, and this is much more what I expect from Eduard. Very, very thin, not too much clear carrier. So hopefully those other decals perform well. Because I know Arma Hobby's decals, which are done by Tech Mod, they are very nice. Tech Mod used to be kind of crap, but they have gotten a lot better. Very thin, very flexible, conform well to details. So we'll have to see how these Eduard ones compare. So the new 1/72nd scale Hurricane, by any other name, from Eduard. Some beautiful plastic parts from Arma Hobby. Beautiful instructions, some curious looking decals, which I am going to do a test of one of the ones I don't plan on using, and I will do a follow-up video letting y'all know if they're good or bad or indifferent. So if you want to see more content like this and possibly a build review featuring Mr. Willie McKnight here, make sure you subscribe, give us a like. Thank you very much, and we'll catch you next time.